Hey guys, it's Zach back here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. Today I'm joined by Eric and Connor, and our primary focus of this episode is going to be about the AFC South. Uh, Despite what some people might be saying, this is going to be a very competitive division, very interesting division. Um, and in the proof of that, the four of us all have different projected standings for this division. So there's no consensus pick between all of us. We've got some similarities, but none of us have the same order of picks here. And so Connor and Eric, you guys can introduce yourself to this episode, and then we'll get rolling.
Yeah, man. It's gonna be cool. This is your guys' wheelhouse, so I'm interested to see how this debate goes on the Jaguars here between you two. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
buckle in, guys, because this is going to be a interesting debate between Zach and myself when we get to it.
This will be like I posted in a tweet earlier. This is going to be, I think, not just entertaining. I mean, it will be entertaining when we get to the Jaguars part, because Eric and I usually don't disagree on things like this, and but also on the other hand, it's going to be really informative because I've looked at the Our Lads.
Zach, you there?
Also, yeah, I'm here. Did you not hear what I was saying?
Yeah, you cut out for a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying that you were looking at Our Lads and then it just kind of cut out after that. So.
Oh, okay. Well, just that the Our Lads thing, I disagree with a couple of things on there. And, it's Eric and myself's favorite team. So just like the Patriots, just like the Steelers, we have the most knowledge on this team. And it's two of us. So we come from both backgrounds, just more minds for this team. And really the division, too, because I follow the division a lot as well. And yeah, so but before we get going with that, I do want to talk about the Clutch Crew Sports Draft. It's coming up in 2 days and 1 hour and 13 minutes if you look at the timer here on YouTube. So
down.
Yeah, you can just keep you keep saying a second, but then it'll go down another second. But so that's going to be really fun. We'll be live streaming that on Twitter. Connor's going to be working on getting the kinks out for that.
Live streaming on YouTube.
Oh, sorry, I said Twitter. I meant to say YouTube. Don't know why Twitter. I was thinking that, but yeah, it's going to be streamed on YouTube, and there's going to be at least 4 people in the chat. Hopefully, more members will be there, but we can guarantee 4 of us in the Skype call, and we'll just show the draft and stuff. It's going to be fun to watch. And with that being said, guys, let's get started with the Texans. Oh, wait, no, before we get to the Texans, I don't know why I skipped over this, but the standings are kind of important. So my standings for the division are, I've got the Jaguars finishing first, the Titans finishing second, Colts finishing third, Texans finishing fourth. Eric has got the Texans finishing first, Jags finishing second, Titans finishing third, and Colts finishing fourth. And then Connor has got the Texans finishing first, Colts finishing second, Jaguars finishing third, Titans finishing fourth. And then Nate has got the Jags finishing first, Colts finishing second, Texans finishing third, and Titans finishing fourth. So if that was confusing for you guys, when we get to the teams, we're going to be saying, I think that, the Texans are going to be first, second, third, etc. So,
and for all you people watching on YouTube, if you didn't notice, those Jaguars logos looked a little bit bigger. Because, not sensing any favoritism or anything here.
Hey, it's a perk of being the creator of this podcast. You can do whatever you want, and that's what
you can make this thing a dictatorship if you want.
Certainly. But that's just how it turned out. It's just how I like the layout. Wanted to change it up a little bit here. We kept a balanced ratio on the others. This time, I was like, let's put the Jaguars logo, make it a little bit bigger. certainly looks better on my list and Nathan's list.
So, although none of us are predicting this, but if at the end of the year the Jaguars end up finishing last, are you also going to make the logo bigger?
I probably won't do a PowerPoint, but I don't know. I'm not going to think about that because this is a positive time of year. This is where all 32 teams have the belief that they can win the division, and that's the first step for any. That's the first step for any success is to win the division. Not too many wild card teams, will make a deep run. In fact, the last couple of years, generally they lose in the first round. Indy was a wild card team that won last year, so they can get to the divisional round. Getting past that's even tougher. But
hey man, my dad's been saying it's the Bills' time for the past 50 years. So you know what? Yes, if he can stay positive, then I'm sure anybody else can. So
yeah.
I will say we may disagree on the standings, but I do agree about the size of the Jaguar logo and the PowerPoint. So we do agree on
that. Yeah. All right. So let's get started here with the Texans. I've got them finishing 4th in the division, and I haven't been picking the chalk in these division standings. If you've paid attention to the orders that I've done, and this is one of those divisions where I think is most likely to be first to worst. Jaguars finished worst last year. I think it's most likely out of all the teams that finished worst, they will jump to first. It happens to a team or two every year. I think that's going to be the case for them. And then also there's teams that go from first to worst. And that's what I see the Texans doing, because last year I think they benefited a lot from this division being weak and kind of beating up on itself. The Colts took care of business against Tennessee. Tennessee took care of business against Jacksonville. Jacksonville was able to beat the Colts in their hot streak to slow them down a little bit after they had won a bunch of games in a row. Somehow they put up a good game. They always give the Colts a good fight. And then the Texans swept the Jags. But I feel like with the Texans, my reasoning for them being 4th is primarily their offensive line. This is one of the worst in football, and I don't think it got a whole lot better in the offseason. I know that they spent a first-round pick on a tackle, but even still, it was a pick on a guy that analysts were kind of shocked about him going in the first round so high. And I feel like at the time, the Texans kind of panicked in the draft because the Eagles were like a pick before them, I want to say, and they picked the tackle from Washington State. And I think that really messed them up, because I think that was who they wanted to take. And then after that happened, they kind of like scrambled and ended up picking this guy. I think it was a classic draft night disaster, really, because I think that they wanted that guy that was picked one before them. And then if you look on a lot of draft boards, they were missing some picks too from trades, so they didn't have a full list of picks. And a lot of the draft analysts gave them the worst draft or the second worst. Or they were in the bottom 5 by most people's standards. And that's not necessarily a good thing when you've got the Colts, who had quite a bit of draft picks, the Jags, who had a high first-round pick from finishing worst last year, and Tennessee also, I think had a good draft by getting some people that kind of slipped in the draft and fell. But the offensive line is my main concern, because Deshaun Watson, the way he plays as a mobile quarterback, he got sacked so many times last year. He missed most of his rookie year because of an injury, because the offensive line is so bad. I just feel like it's going to be hard for him to stay healthy. And even if he is healthy, I think they're finishing worse because they just don't have many weapons on their team. I know they've got DeAndre Hopkins, who's arguably the best receiver in football. But to me, that's all teams have to focus on is him, in my opinion. The other wide receivers are all right, but they don't really scare you. They don't, they're going to force you to throw to those receivers, and they're going to try and limit Hopkins. Obviously, you can't stop him completely, but you can work around it, I think. And then the running back situation, I think, is an unfortunate situation with Lamar Miller getting injured, but he has familiarity with the team. He's been there a couple years, and he was their main guy. And then now their starter is a guy who just came over a couple weeks ago from Cleveland, who felt like they could trade him out and only get like a late round draft pick for compensation. So they obviously didn't really value him that highly. And I don't think it's an upgrade from Lamar Miller. I think they got worse at that position, and I think it only makes their offense worse. It doesn't improve them at all. And then their tight ends aren't that great, I don't think. This isn't a great tight end division, but I just don't see them having a true pass-catching threat at tight end this year. And then defensively, you see here this black name here looks a little different because it's Jadeveon Clowney, and this is an instance of another kind of situation with the Texans why I think they're going to finish last because Clowney, I don't think he's lived up to being a number one overall pick, but I think his play is a lot better than what the stats say. I think he has a lot of impact on the game that doesn't necessarily translate into sacks and in statistical things that you'll measure. But I still think he's a big part of their defense, and he's not off the team yet, but it's funny how he was franchise tagged, and he said he wasn't going to play with the franchise tag, and he kept negotiating for a long-term deal, and the Texans weren't willing to commit to a long-term deal with him. And then they started publicly shopping him to teams like Seattle, Miami, and Philly. And it's funny because he said that he was actually planning to return to the Texans, but after they had made it clear that they wanted to trade him, he said now he's done. So he's not playing on the Texans. But he was, in his mind, going to come back to them. That's what he said anyways. So it's kind of like a situation where the Texans kind of messed up on that. And the rest of their defense, it's got some holes. I mean, the secondary is not that great, in my opinion. Jonathan Joseph's an aging corner. Tashawn Gibson, I think he lost a step last year. I don't think he played as athletically as he has before. Still really good against tight ends, but this isn't necessarily a tight end division. And then Bradley Roby, he's good, but I just feel like it's not great. And then, I mean, it's a good defense, but when you look at the other defenses in this division, I'd probably put this as third or fourth. And I've already made my thoughts about the offense, but those are all the reasons why I think that the Texans are going to finish last. And just a couple of years ago, they finished last in the division too. So, this division has a high turnover rate in the past couple of years. 2 years ago, the Jags won, then they went to last. And then the Texans were last a couple of years ago, then they went to first. It's a high volatile division. So I don't think the Texans are going to win the division again. You saw them struggle a lot in that playoff game. I just think they were an ill-equipped team in the playoffs. And if they do make it to the playoffs, I don't see them having much success. And I think this is really the last chance for Bill O'Brien to, now with Andrew Luck out of the division, there's really no excuses for him. He needs to win this season, and he needs to make an AFC championship. But I'll let you guys take the floor now.
Yeah, so just like with my disagreement of Zach on where the Jaguars are going to finish, we have complete opposite rankings of where we had the Texans. I actually have the Texans winning the division again this year, although the main reason for that is because of the Andrew Luck retirement. I actually had the Colts finishing first until Andrew Luck announced his retirement, so I had the Texans as second. But I still think the Texans have a great chance to win the division this year. I have to disagree a little bit on the comment about the wide receivers because Will Fuller has shown that he can be a big-time playmaker as well. So, although the problem with both him and Kiki Kuti is that they've both been injured a lot. So I will give Zach like a credit in the sense that, if these guys like go down with injury again, then the Texans could be they most likely would be in serious trouble. But if Fuller and QT can both stay healthy and be on the field at the same time with DeAndre Hopkins, that is a really solid trio of wide receivers. And I know they don't have any tight ends really. I will agree with Zach on that. The tight end crew is nothing to write home about. I mean, I feel like the Jaguars don't have good tight ends either, but I do, even though the Jaguars tight end situation is not good, I like their situation better than this. And similar with their offensive line, the offensive line has struggled. So those are definitely going to be the biggest weaknesses for the team. But with Deshaun Watson, he can be a little reckless, but his situation kind of reminds me to similar of like Russell Wilson, where he's a mobile quarterback with a bad offensive line. But Russell Wilson, every year, everybody says, "Oh, the Seahawks offensive line is so bad. Russell Wilson's going to be terrible. He's in such a bad situation." But it seems like every year, no matter how bad his offensive line is, Russell Wilson just seems to manage to have a good year. And I feel like Deshaun Watson will still be able to make it work. I mean, obviously, it would be better if he had a better offensive line around him than he has, but I still think he's going to be able to make it work. And Duke Johnson, I feel like he was very underused in Cleveland. I didn't really like how they used him, especially when Hugh Jackson was their coach. He's such a good, reliable weapon out of the backfield as a pass-catching back, and it seemed like Cleveland never threw it to the running backs, like, ever. I personally did not understand that. So if he can I know he hasn't been there very long, but if he can build up a rapport with Watson, I don't know how great of a, like, in between the tackles running back type of deal he's going to be, but I think he'll have a solid role as a pass catcher there. And I personally, too, am like okay with the Texans defense, even without Jadeveon Clowney. Obviously, it would be a lot better if he was there, but I feel like their defensive line and linebacking core is all right. And I mean, J.J. Watt's, he seems to regress a little bit each year, but he still is a capable player. I mean, he's obviously someone you're going to have to game plan against and give a lot of attention to. Tashawn Gibson and the safety role, he definitely didn't play as good with the Jags last year, but I don't know how much of that was. I feel like some of that might have been some frustration, like later on in the season, because it just seemed like a lot of the defensive players just kind of gave up last year when it was obvious it wasn't going to work with Bortles and the Jaguars went on that big losing streak. It just seemed like everybody was playing bad at that time. So I think he's still capable as a safety. Aaron Colvin was solid when he was with the Jags, although he's had some injury concerns as well. My biggest concern on the defense would be Jonathan Joseph for sure. I mean, he's up there in age. I'm not sure exactly how old he is, but I know he's getting up there. It seems like every year he still has like a few decent games, but then he has other games where he's getting burned a lot. So I would be concerned with that as if I was a Texans fan going into the season. But I just think with some of the other stuff that's happening within the division, mainly, I mean, just with Andrew Luck retiring alone, that already made me feel like the Texans were going to move ahead of the Colts. In fact, actually, I moved everybody ahead of the Colts because of that. And with the Titans, with like Taylor Lewan being suspended for the first few games out the gate, and the Jaguars, they haven't had any like major injuries yet, but the Jaguars have lost.
Yeah.
Telvin Smith is a huge loss, and then that's not an injury deal. Who knows what's going on with him, but
it's kind of like luck actually.
But some of their rookies that they were like hoping to come in and contribute right away have gotten injured, and they're not sure like what all of their availabilities for week 1 are going to be yet, and just like with all this stuff, of course with Clowney possibly being gone and then Lamar Miller being out for the year, the Texans have been having a similar problem. So it just really throws things up like in the air. I mean, this is a really interesting division because it's just like if you saw our standings, if you were looking at the screen, you saw our standings, like we have completely different projections for all of these teams. This is really the only division in football right now where I could see like any team finishing first, but I could also see any of the teams finishing last. You know what I mean? Like, so this is definitely going to be a fun division to keep track of. Like, even if you're not a fan of any of these teams, like it's definitely one to have your eye on for sure. But Connor, I don't know if you have any thoughts you would like to add on the Texans, but that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Eric's saying because I was pretty much in the same scenario as Eric where I had the Colts finishing first before, the whole Andrew Luck deal. So that elevated the Texans to first for me. I only dropped the Colts down to second. I didn't drop them all the way to last like Eric did, but it still elevated the Texans to first for me. And it's mainly, this is going to be a theme for me kind of in the AFC South as to why, because like Eric said, any team could win this division, but it's more so like a trust. I have more of a trust in the Texans that they've proved it more in the past that they can, that they have the weapons that they, even through Deshaun Watson playing bad. I mean, it's going to be harder this year, but even through Deshaun Watson playing bad, they can still win and still, perform at a high level. I think Deshaun Watson's going to have a bounce back year. I remember last year I picked him like in the 3rd round of fantasy. He was supposed to be my quarterback. And I didn't end up starting him very many weeks. I ended up starting Jared Goff and Ben Roethlisberger instead. So he was a bit of a disappointment last year. I think he's going to have a bounce-back year. I don't think the loss of Lamar Miller is as big as some people think that it is because, I think it was like his first couple of years in Houston and obviously some of his latter years in Miami, he was like really good and he was putting up big numbers and everybody thought he was, one of the best running backs in the league. But he really started to regress last year and even the year before that, where it's like he's just kind of there. Like, yeah, he's the number 1 guy, but he's just kind of like an average running back. So I don't think it's a huge loss. I don't think Duke Johnson can be an every down back. I mean, he is going to have to get support from Buddy Howell and Josh Ferguson if he's going to be successful. But I do agree with Eric that I think Cleveland severely underused him. Back when he was sitting behind Isaiah Crowell and they kept just kind of going back to Crowell and didn't really give Duke Johnson a chance to do anything. And then, the wide receiver trio, I also agree with Eric on that. If Will Fuller and Kiki Kuti can stay healthy with DeAndre Hopkins, especially Will Fuller has proved in the past, like he's definitely had off games, but he's also had games where he's looked like a superstar. So if all 3 of those guys are healthy, that is a deadly wide receiver trio. Yes, Deshaun Watson's probably going to be running for his life most of the time, but at least he's got the mobility to get around that. It is going to be tough, but if the offensive line can just give him, a couple seconds, one of these 3 wide receivers is going to be open for him to throw it to. And then the defense, again, Clowney being gone is a hurt. For the longest time, we didn't know if he was going to stay or leave, and now it looks like for sure he's going to leave. So, that hurts, but I don't think it's going to take them down too much. J.J. Watt's still very capable at in his position. Like Eric said, he looks like he's regressing a little bit. He's had a lot of injuries over his career. But, I mean, he's still – I can't remember the exact number, but he still put up like 14 or 15 sacks last year. So that's still really good. And it's still going to warrant that, teams are going to want to have to double team him, which can maybe open the door for someone else to step up. I don't know who that's going to be, but it could be someone else. And then Yeah, aside from Jonathan Joseph, I like the secondary. Tashawn Gibson, and I think it's kind of odd that our lads here has Bradley Roby listed as the right corner and the nickelback. I'm not sure how that works, but
he's gonna clone
him. So yeah, but I think Justin Reed's an okay safety. He can hold it down back there, and yeah, I mean, I think they've proved more so in the past. I have more confidence in them than I do in the Titans and the Jaguars in terms of like that they proved to me last year that they can do it, and they didn't, and everybody's going through stuff. If they were the only team that was going through problems right now, then yeah, I could see warning them lower, but everybody's going through problems in this division. So I think that kind of just resets it back to, everybody's on the same playing field again, and the Texans have proved it to me in the past that they can do it. So that's why I have them finishing first, and why, I don't think the Lamar Miller and Clowney losses are as big as some people think they are.
All right, sounds good, guys. We'll move on to the Colts now, and I've got the Colts here ranked third in the division. Connor's got them second, and Eric's got them last. And obviously, Andrew Luck's the main storyline with the Colts. But I do want to just point out that I actually didn't change my standings when the Andrew Luck news came out, because I had already factored into my standings like a few weeks ago before, or maybe it was like a month ago. But I had already factored in, I didn't think Andrew Luck was going to play much at all this season. So just based on the history of Andrew Luck and these injuries, and they didn't say anything about it being minor. They just, they were really mysterious about this whole injury. And it was kind of like the same thing a couple of years ago. They were so mysterious about this injury. They made it seem like he was going to be back week 1. He was just missing the preseason. And then like every week, they would do it. They would have weekly updates on his injury, instead of just saying, "Oh, he's gonna miss the whole season." So I was already under the impression that Andrew Luck wasn't gonna play much this year. I didn't think he'd retire, but I went into anticipating.
I don't think anybody thought he was gonna retire.
No, but I thought Brissett was gonna be their quarterback for most of the year, so that's why I have them finishing third, because I still think this is a good team. They've had a lot of high draft picks from the past couple of years, and a lot of draft picks because they've traded back, and they haven't really spent much money in free agency. And now that Luck's going to be gone from their team, they don't have his contract anymore. They have even more money to spend. So it's crazy the potential of this team if they, they're a conservative team that they want to conserve their money and pay their guys. Oh, not right now, guys. Restart.
Yeah, we don't need your computer restarting right now.
God, that'd be awful.
The podcast is over, guys.
Thanks for joining us. We're not going to get to the Jaguars after all.
But so this team's been built the right way. They finally put pieces into the offensive line. Quentin Nelson was an All-Pro last year. A couple years before, they had first-round center in Ryan Kelly. Glowinski's another good guard. So they've got one of the better offensive lines in football. And that's why Andrew Luck really didn't get hurt last year, because they had good protection there. And we're really going to see now, and this is my belief, that I think Eric Ebron is an average tight end, and that Andrew Luck made him look better. And Jacoby Brissett, well, I think he's going to be okay. I just don't think he's going to win you a whole lot of games. So I've got the Colts finishing third here. Marlon Mack, I'm a little bit more worried about him. He's my favorite player on the Colts because he went to USF, and I actually watched him at USF too. So he wasn't like before my time or anything. He was there my freshman year here at USF. So I watched him a lot. I was happy to see him get drafted. Not to the Colts necessarily, but happy that he's now
what are you doing, man?
So, but I worry a little bit for him because he benefited. I mean, he's still got the offensive line, but he benefited a lot from the threat of Andrew Luck as a QB throwing. And now I feel like teams are gonna be more geared to stop the run with Brissett. And so I don't think he's gonna have as good of a season. If you want to do like a fantasy assessment, I would rank his fantasy draft position. I would draft him way later, and I would draft Eric Ebron way later as well, because I'm not sure those guys are going to be as good as they were without Andrew Luck. And same with even T.Y. Hilton, but I would still put him as like in that first couple rounds as somewhere to get, because he's really going to be the main guy for the offense. Defensively, it's a really good defensive team. I mean, they've got a lot of young pieces, and just a couple of years ago, they were so bad on defense, but they've really made this an emphasis of improvement with getting all those extra draft picks from that Colts trade, or the trade with the Jets 2 years ago. They got a bunch more draft picks that are turning into great players like Darius Leonard, and a year before that, Malik Hooker at safety. I think Rock Ya-Sin's going to be really good for them as a nickelback, and their big signing was Justin Houston, who he'll help. But I mean, I still don't think this defense is. I think this defense is kind of on par with Houston. They might not have the star power that Houston has with Watt, but I still think as a defense they're going to be solid, and that's why I don't think they're going to finish last. I think they've got the offense, I think, is going to score more points. They're going to be a little bit more ball control of a team. But no, like I said before, I didn't think that Luck was going to play much this year, so I had the Colts third anyways, but they've still got a good team. So I wouldn't count them out, and I'm like these guys that any of these teams could win this division. But I just don't see the Colts doing it now. And then with Luck going right before the season too, it'd be one thing if he had made this decision way long ago, but it's a sudden shock for the team, and we're gonna see how good Frank Reich does with Brissett. So,
well, I'm like, a lot of the points that you brought up are the reason why I only dropped them to second rather than last place. Because again, just off of what they had last year, I mean, I know I do have to thank Eric Ebron, because while Deshaun Watson didn't perform for me in fantasy, I had Eric Ebron on my team, and he was like the second highest scoring tight end behind Travis Kelce last year, I think, or something, or at least for most until the last couple of weeks, and he started to suck. But up until that point, he was like the second best tight end. And I think Ebron and Jack Doyle is a good tight end combo. I mean, because both of them can catch the ball. Ebron's not a blocker at all. Ebron's a terrible blocker, but I think both of them as a tight end duo could actually be somewhat dangerous if they can kind of figure out how, because they had a problem last year when both of them, Doyle was hurt most of the year, but whenever they were on the field at the same time, it seemed like they could get one of them going, but they couldn't get the other one going. They couldn't figure out how to make the duo work. So I think if they can figure that out, that could be really good for them. And then I think the addition of Devin Funchess is really good for T.Y. Hilton, because I remember watching Devin Funchess in Carolina, and they kind of had to try and rely on him as the number one receiver after Kelvin Benjamin left, which, I mean, Benjamin wasn't that good to start with anyway, but they had to rely on him as the number one guy, and he couldn't quite do it. He wasn't really built to be a number one receiver. So I think having him as that number two option to T.Y. Hilton really opens things up for T.Y. Hilton, because now there's another pretty good receiver that the defense has to focus on and cover besides T.Y. Hilton. And offensive line is pretty decent. Obviously, it's all, and I think Marlon Mack is going to have a good year again. I don't think he's going to fall off. I think he'll be good. But yeah, the big question mark is obviously Jacoby Brissett. I mean, we saw how he performed last time when Luck was injured. Obviously, the Colts didn't have the team that they have now, but he still didn't really inspire much confidence. He's got a big arm, but can he put together the other pieces that are going to at least make him serviceable enough to just he really just needs to be a game manager in a way, because, I mean, almost like a Trent Dilfer-esque quarterback is what he needs to be. He just needs to not make mistakes because the Colts have a running back and they have a defense, and he's got receivers he can throw to. So as long as Jacoby Brissett doesn't make mistakes, I don't think he needs to be. I don't think the Colts need a superstar quarterback. I don't think they need Andrew Luck. I don't know if that'll win them the division or not without Andrew Luck, but at least it can take them places to where they can maybe win the division or compete for a playoff spot. But then, yeah, you look at the defense, obviously, is still the strength of this team as they were last year. I mean, Darius Leonard it was between him and Derwin James for Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, and Leonard got the title, which I think he deserved more than Derwin James did. So, and I don't know how effective Justin Houston's going to be. I mean, he's got injured so many times in Kansas City, and at this point now he's, quite a bit older. So I don't know how much of an impact Justin Houston's going to make. I mean, if he can somehow find even a small part of his former self, then yeah, he will make an impact. But that's a big if. And the question is, can he stay healthy? But I mean, the rest of the defense is solid. It's kind of one of those defenses that there's not a lot of names on this defense that you'd really recognize. It's just like, it's one of those quietly good defenses. It's almost like the Miami Dolphins defense from back in the 70s when they went undefeated. It was a bunch of guys that nobody had ever heard of, and people still probably never heard of them unless you're a Miami fan. But yet they were one of the most dominant defenses in the league, and no one talked about them. I think that's kind of what this defense is like. It's a bunch of people that you've never really heard of. I mean, I think people have heard of Jabal Sheard, and obviously they know Rock Ya-Sin from the draft, but it's a bunch of people that nobody's ever really heard of, but yet they somehow form this really good defense. So we'll see how that goes. And then didn't talk about this with Houston, but on the place kicker, standpoint, Adam Vinatieri's still there. I don't know how much longer he's going to play, but it's amazing that the guy's still even in the league at age like 50 almost at this point. So
he's like 45, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, like he's really up there in age. So, but I mean, he's still getting it done. I mean, he hasn't shown he doesn't quite have the range that he used to have, but he's still accurate as ever. So, I mean, there's still not a whole lot of guys I'd want taking that game-winning field goal in the league over him. So, when it comes to close games, the Colts are in good hands there. So that's why I still have them finishing second. I think they have, again, like I said with Houston, they've proved to me that they have other pieces they can still compete, even though they lost Andrew Luck. So that's why I think they're going to finish second. I'll let Eric talk about them now.
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with really like everything Hunter said in terms of the overall talent on this team. But the reason, because I had them at first place before Andrew Luck announced his retirement. But my problem is I just don't trust Brissett at quarterback. I mean, when you look at the year he had just a couple seasons ago when Andrew Luck missed that whole season, and the Colts were pretty bad that year. And the next year, Luck comes back, and they they obviously getting, Quentin Nelson on the offensive line was big, and getting, Darius Leonard on the defensive end was big. I mean, those were, big additions that they got when Luck came back. Yeah, Ebron ended up having but see, I'm in agreement with Zach too on that though. That what did Eric Ebron do in Detroit with Matthew Stafford? I mean, and Matthew Stafford's a good quarterback too. Like, he didn't really do much, but then he finally had a good year. So I'm attributing a lot of that to Andrew Luck. I don't know how he's going to do without him. It kind of reminds me of like Julius Thomas when he came to Jacksonville from Denver, when he had Peyton Manning lobbing him all those touchdowns, and then he got to Jacksonville and didn't do anything. So, worst jersey I ever bought. I could go into a rant.
I've got worse.
For the sake of time, I'm not going to rant on Julius Thomas right now. But so, And this situation reminds me very similarly of the situation the Jaguars were in last year. We had arguably the top defense going into the season. Now, our offense was not as good as, in terms of all the positions, as what the Colts have now. Like, our offense wasn't as good as this, but still. But the main factor was, like, is Blake Bortles going to be able to take the next step at quarterback? And he didn't, and then the whole team suffered because of it. And I just don't trust Jacoby Brissett to be that guy, because he's, had a chance before and did not really take advantage of it. And then plus, if he goes down, I mean, their situation behind him is really terrible. So I don't trust Brissett. Now, if he turns around and proves me wrong, then hey, like, kudos to him for doing that. Because I do, I'm in agreement with Zach and Connor here that I feel like they have the pieces around him to be successful, but I just don't trust him. I just don't see it happening. So because of that, I have the Colts finishing last.
Yeah. So we disagreed on that a little bit, but now time for
the moment you've
Jaguars.
all been waiting for.
Yeah. To all of our Jacksonville audience base out here, this one's for you. We were doing it no matter what, but so the Jaguars here, like I said, I've got them finishing first. I could see them not finishing first, but when it comes to these prediction things, I want to be optimistic about my team, and I don't think that there's really an argument for them to be that they, like, you give them a chance to get first. It's not like a crazy thing like you're picking the Bengals to finish first or Miami or Arizona or one of those teams. It's not that big of a stretch for them to finish first because they did it 2 years ago. But I'll get into the reasons why I think they'll finish first, and then Eric can kind of say why he agrees with me, but what he might disagree with. But before that, I do want to point out some things on our lads that I think is wrong on here. Marquise Lee is not going to be the opening day starter. That's going to be D.D. Westbrook and Chris Conley. Chark will be third. I don't think Lee will play, so that'll bump him down. He'll still be on the team. Pryor's not making the team because he can't play special teams at all. Board will make the practice squad. Same with maybe Brady. But McBride will make the team based solely on special teams. And that's what you really look for in your sixth receiver. And then on the offensive line, I'd put Wells above Leonard Wester. Leonard Wester's looked really awful in preseason, and I know Wells has had a lot of injury issues in the past, but the left tackle spot is the most scary spot, I think, on this team because Cam Robinson's coming back from that injury, and he just got back to practicing a couple weeks ago. So if he goes down again, I mean, they had 4 left tackles last year that they had to go through. And, if you go through 4 left tackles, no matter what your team is, it's gonna take a hit from that. Andrew Norwell, I think he's a little bit overrated, to be honest with you. An undrafted guy from Carolina who made an all-pro team and got a lot of money here. If he can be healthy, I think he'll be good, but I don't think he's going to be great or anything. He's not like the Quentin Nelson on the Colts, but I do think he'll be solid if he's healthy. I don't like the depth after him. And then Linder's a guy who's also really good, but he's never played a full season. So Shatley's gotten a lot of experience as the backup center, and they're working A.J. Cann as being a backup center to potentially get Shatley out of the mix. And then I definitely disagree with this right here. Jawan Taylor is going to be the day one right tackle starter.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's looked way better than Ogwe he has, and he's also a second-round pick. So you're going to lean towards that.
Should have been a first-round pick. Somehow
yeah, he was projected to be a first-rounder.
He's looked good, too. He's got an injury. He had an injury, but before that, he was looking really good. and he's just got to work on some false start issues. But he's a big mauler, man. He's a true right tackle. And then this is another one I disagree on. I think they're going to start Will Richardson over AJ Cann because Will Richardson has looked really good this camp, and they moved him from. He was originally a right tackle at NC State last year, or 2 years ago. He got drafted in the 4th round last year, missed the whole season from injury. Nobody even remembered him until he came back to the team this year, and he's looked really good, and he's big. He fits their, what they want on the offensive line. He's bigger than Cann, and Can's not on a super big deal so that, you can defend him being the starter. He's got the experience. Can's got experience, but he's really not been great. I think they're going to put Will Richardson there because I think he's got more upside to that. And then Cann will be your backup right guard and your backup center if need be. The tight end spots, if Oliver comes back, he's a true pass-catching tight end. He has no blocking ability at all. But Jeff Swaim is more like your average tight end, blocking and catching-wise. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think he'll be all right. And then they'll keep O'Shaughnessy because he's been with the team the longest, I think. And then I don't think Ben Koyak makes it. I'd put Charles Jones, the undrafted rookie, to make the team solely on his upside and his blocking ability. He's by far the best blocker out of all these tight ends. So I think he'll make the team over Koyak. Koyak's never really done anything anyways. And then they'll keep Minshew as the backup quarterback. They like what they see out of him, even though he's struggled in the preseason. But if Foles goes down, this team's not going to win a whole lot of games. Yeah.
I love Eric. We're screwed.
Yeah. Magoo's an interesting guy. I think they might try and keep him on the practice squad. But and then the running back situation's not great either. Fournette's really the only guy here. Blue's not very good. Armstead's looked good at times as a rookie, so he'll be interesting. But he kind of runs the same style as Fournette. So I think he looks for contact, man. Like he pops people. He's gonna get hurt the way he runs. The thing with Fournette is he's got to learn to avoid contact sometimes, and also he's got to be a better pass catching back. And I think you will, because Armstead's not a pass catching back at all. I think they'll keep Rawls. I haven't seen a whole lot of him because of injuries, but he's got experience, and I think they'll keep these 4 running backs. But 2 through 4 are fluid. They're not set by any means. And then defensively, the big addition is Josh Allen, obviously the first-round pick. And, I mean, this defense is great. Like, the starters anyways, the linebackers are the biggest uncertainty, but Quincy Williams looked really good in training camp. He's supposed to be back by week 1. And then they've got some other veteran linebackers here like Najee Good, and they like Leon Jacobs, but I don't think Leon Jacobs is going to be playing a whole lot. He's listed here as a starter, but I think he might only be on the field 30% of their defensive packages. And then Ronnie Harrison, I think, is going to be a big star on this defense. I think he's really going to improve. Jared Wilson's the biggest question mark in the secondary spot. Obviously, you've got Ramsey and Boye, 2 great corners. And then DJ Hayden was really good as a nickelback. So that's going to be interesting. Early on in camp, CJ Rivas was pushing Wilson for that spot. So that spot's up in the air. And then also you could see a signing post cuts to fill that free safety spot. But Wilson's an undrafted guy a couple of years ago who's kind of worked his way up. And he's listed as a starter. I agree with that for now. But Rivas, that's the battle to watch on the defense for the starters anyways. I've got a couple other issues down here, like Eli Anku, I think, will be cut. I'd put Dontavius Russell ahead of him. And I'd also put Breon Borders, one of the backup. I mean, these are getting way down the depth chart, but there's a couple things I'd change here. But and then Jake Ryan, he hasn't even shown up because he's been injured. But now that I got all that out of the way.
Well, but before you go any further, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
Where do you think in the draft your dad will take the Jaguars defense? Because I know he's going to be the one that's going to take take them earlier than everybody else. So where do you think he's going to take them?
Well, actually, I think it's either going to be him or Uncle Greg that takes, because this is Uncle Greg's last season. Uncle Greg, by the way, guys, is Eric's dad. He's an uncle to Connor and myself. I think he actually is going to take him this year because it's his last year in the league, and he's made it clear that he doesn't like it when he goes up against Jaguar players. So I actually think he's going to take the Jaguars defense pretty early. So I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think my dad will pick them.
So like round 3, you think maybe?
I don't know about that early, but probably like round 7 or something.
6 or 7th round.
Like he'll get them around earlier than they should be drafted just to ensure that he's got them. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Eric, do you agree with that, or do you think he's not going to pick them?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he does.
Yeah.
I don't ever talk like draft strategy with him, so I don't know. I don't know what's going through his or my mom's head with that stuff, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. So now to my argument to why this team will finish first. I think that this team's going to finish first because Nick Foles. And Nick Foles is not going to be a league MVP this year. He's been a Super Bowl MVP, and we'll get to that later. But I just think he's going to be so much of an upgrade over Bortles that this team is going to be able to score points. And I don't see this defense giving up a whole lot of points. I think even with Telvin gone, Telvin was kind of fading at the end of last year anyways. He wasn't playing his best. Last year was definitely his worst year he's had maybe since his rookie year. So with that as their biggest loss, and then Quincy Williams stepping up in that spot and looking really good, they are coming in with a healthy offensive line. I tackles last year. That's an incredible amount of left tackles to go through. Norwell was hurt halfway through the year. Linder was hurt like halfway through the year. And then their only starters were really A.J. Cann, who was playing banged up. I mean, he looked like Bionic Man. Or no, Jeremy Parnell looked like Bionic Man out there with all the stuff on his body. I mean, seriously, they got rid of him. I think Jawan Taylor's a massive upgrade on that. I love what I have really high expectations for how he's going to do. So I think as an offensive line, they've gotten so much healthier. They've got a so much better quarterback. Nick Foles from Bortles is such a massive upgrade. And Fournette is coming into the year healthy. I don't know how long that'll last, but they're going to get at least a healthy Fournette for week 1. So
at least the first game.
Yeah. Rookie receivers tend to struggle their rookie year, and that was the case for DJ Chark. But this is his second year, and he was a second-round draft pick. So this is the year he's supposed to make an impact. He wasn't really supposed to do much last year. So this is his year. Marquise Lee, of course, missed the entire year. I know he's not the best receiver in the world, but he's at least another piece to the puzzle. And then D.D. Westbrook has gotten better each season. I think he's the number 1 receiver on this team. Not a great number 1 receiver, but he's got upside to him. And I think Chris Conley is going to be a better receiver than Dante Moncrief was, because him and Nick Foles have that connection from Kansas City. They're like apparently best friends or something. That was the reason why Conley came here. A big reason why anyways, is after Nick came, he really wanted to go wherever Nick Foles went because he had such a good connection with Foles back when they were both like on the second team in Kansas City back then a couple years ago. And Foles is like one of the best leaders of a quarterback that there is. And this team was so undisciplined last year. I mean, the penalties themselves cost this team some games. The amount of penalties that they had unnecessarily. They were such an undisciplined team, and I think Foles as a leader is going to be able to lead this team to first place, like he's done the past couple of years with Philly. He's people haven't really expected him to, but he's been able to do it. The locker room that he's been in really respects him, and they really play hard for him. You hear what the Eagles players said when about him versus Wentz. They love Wentz obviously, but when Foles came in, they felt inspired to play for him. One of the players on the Eagles, I forget who, but they built a shrine to him in the locker room. I mean, he's just loved by everybody. He's got a connection with their new offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo. So I think there's just so many new offensive additions to this team that I don't see how they can't be better offensively than they were last year. And then my other point about that is they don't need to be at Kansas City on offense. I think they only need 20 points a game to win most of their games. They've got such a good defense here that is going to keep them in games no matter what. I mean, they kept them in games last year, just the offense couldn't score more than 10 points. And Calais Campbell, I know he's old, but he's had the best sack numbers of his career the past 2 years. So until he stops, producing, I'm not going to say he won't, because this defensive line around him is so good that he can be rotated in and out. He doesn't have to play the whole game, so. And then another kind of wrinkle to this team is that now they do play a 4-3 the majority of the time, but they're going to a 3-4 with Josh Allen, who is an outside linebacker at Kentucky. So they're switching it up a little bit. You see them in the preseason against Miami with their starters. They showed some 3-4 looks with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen in that Miami game looked insane. I mean, there was a couple times he was like unblocked, so it looked really good, but I mean, he's just shoved people out of the way, offensive linemen. I know Miami's got a bad offensive line, but as a rookie, I mean, he's not on the starting lineup here, but he's going to be contributing a lot to this team. He's going to get a lot of sacks. Taven Bryan's not a starter, but that's a good thing. So
yes.
Eric agrees with that. So they don't need him to start. Usually when you pick a guy in the first round and you expect him to start by year 2. That's not the case with Taven Bryan, but that's a good thing because he's their backup to Marcel Darius, who is been an elite run defender the past couple of years. I wish he could get back to that, the years he had in Buffalo, where he was also a pass rusher, an excellent pass rusher too, but he's their primary run stopper. That's what they primarily ask him to do, because they've got Ngakoue and Campbell on the edge. And then Avery Jones, I think he's the longest tenured Jaguar in this team. He's kind of consistent. He's not great, but he doesn't mess up too much. So I like their defensive line a lot. I think Miles Jack has got more experience now. Everyone knows Miles Jack wasn't down. Shout out to the AFC Championship game a couple years ago.
Don't tell that to Nathan.
Yeah. Well, he knows. He just
he knows in his heart.
Yeah.
I agree, by the way. I agree. He was not down.
Yeah. And it's a young linebacking core around him, but I think that the linebacking core is not as important on the defensive side as edge rushers and corners are. I think if you have really good edge rushers and really good corners, you can get away with weaker linebackers. And I think, Miles Jack is in a prove-it contract here, and he's uncertain to be back. So he's going to be highly motivated for a good season. And he's been to camp the whole time. He's been, early mornings, late nights sort of thing. He's a role model citizen, and he's a model Jaguar too. So I like him there. The Leon Jacobs, I said, is probably the weakest starter here in this official depth chart. But Ronnie Harrison, I think, Ramsey talks so much about him. He's tall. He's really, Ronnie Harrison actually retweeted about a month or so ago one of Eric's tweets, which is really awesome. But even before that like retweet thing, I was praising Ronnie Harrison about the potential that he's got coming out of Alabama, and he's going to be a good safety in this league for years to come. I think he was a steal for the third round. Uh, and then Boye had kind of a down year last year, but he was still pretty good. I think like Eric said before, a lot of these guys were unmotivated last year when the losing happened. I don't think that's the case this year. I just think Nick Foles is going to inspire this team to first place in the division. And hey, there's no quarterback I'd want more than him, other than like Brady and stuff in the playoffs the past couple of years. He's shown that he can win games for you in the playoffs. And the special teams side, Logan Cook's a pretty good punter. I mean, he definitely got a lot of practice last year. Uh,
Almost every drive that wasn't a turnover.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, but he did. And Lambo's been really consistent. He's the proven guy now for kicker. We don't have a kicker battle anymore. They didn't even bring in a kicker at camp. Most teams do bring in a second kicker, but the Jaguars decided not to do that this year. And then even on the return team, I mean, D.D. Westbrook's taken some punt returns back. I hear that back in Jax on the radio. They're like, apparently someone got a Dreamfinder's home for that punt back for a touchdown. They say last year D.D. Westbrook took one back to the house for a Dreamfinder's home. And then Chark as a returner, I don't think he's as great, but he's a really good gunner and has really made some huge hits that caused fumbles on special teams. And Joe DeCamillis here. I mean, this is the kind of information you wouldn't get from a normal fan, but I know everything about this team. He's been in the league like 30 years, really respected special teams coach, and I think he's going to be he's been with them a couple of years. So the special teams I'm not concerned about. The three major things that were wrong with this team last year where it was the health of the offensive line, the lack of quarterback, and the unnecessary amount of penalties they got. And I think all of those things are going to be solved with Nick Foles and the new healthy offensive line. So I spent a lot of time on this, but I wanted to make sure I got everything out to you guys. So those are all my reasons. And then Eric, you can go say your stuff, and then Connor can say who he leans towards, who he thinks did a better job presenting their argument. But that's my argument. Those are my three main things in the essay.
My argument will definitely not be as long as Zach's, but
yeah.
Before I get into my point, I am going to say, out of all the podcasts we've ever done where we've ever made any kind of prediction or had any kind of debate or anything like that, this is going to be the main one where I hope I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, but so now that I got that out of the way, I had the Jaguars finishing third initially, and obviously, again, this has been a main topic throughout this episode, but Andrew Luck retiring definitely changed things. So, and then with the Lamar Miller and Jadeveon Clowney situations in Houston, like, I don't have as much of a case like against Jacksonville winning the division as I had just like a couple weeks ago. So this definitely is not going to be we initially going into this thought we were going to have this intense debate but, I mean that's not going to happen. But this is my problem that I have with the Jaguars. This is my number one thing that worries me about this team. After what happened last year with all of the injuries, it's too hard to not worry about that, because it's not. And if you look at a lot of these players on this team, it's not even just it just happened last year. It was a fluky deal where all these players got hurt. I mean, a lot of these players that are supposed to start for the Jaguars this year, it seems like they're injured all the time. Like Marquise Lee.
I disagree, but I'll get
well,
there.
I mean,
sorry. Offensively, I agree with you. Not on the defense though. I don't think Ramsey's never missed a game.
Yeah,
but,
defensively,
Mhm.
I'm not too concerned. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there hasn't really been anybody that you could say like, oh, they have an injury problem on the
Mhm.
defense. But it's the offense though, and
Yeah,
the
I can see the offense. Yeah,
the offense is the weaker side of this team. I
yeah.
mean, if you look at our defense, I mean, our if our defense like plays to their potential, like they did in 2017, I mean, they could very easily be the best defense in football. I mean, that's what I love the most about this team, and why I wouldn't have them, finishing farther down in the division. But I get concerned with the injuries on this team. Like, I know Nick Foles like spent a lot of his time in Philly as a backup, so it wasn't like he was missing time because of injuries. But he has had some injuries throughout his career that caused him to miss time. It seems like Leonard Fournette gets hurt every year. I
Yeah.
mean, he hasn't been in the league that long, but both of his seasons in the league, he's missed a substantial amount of
Mhm.
time.
Suspensions too. I mean,
Yeah,
he
I
hasn't
mean,
been he hasn't been a model citizen. Let's just say
no, I mean,
that.
I think he's going into a contract year, so he's more motivated. But so I don't think he's gonna like let himself get suspended or yeah. I'm hoping that he's done like doing the stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But but again, he's been injured a lot in his first two seasons. And Jawan Taylor's already seemed to have some kind of knee problem. That's why he slid in the draft to the second round, apparently. And there's questions about his availability. Brandon Linder, who's our best offensive lineman, in my opinion, I mean, guy's a beast, but he gets hurt all the time. I
He's
don't think
never
he,
played a healthy
I
year.
say I don't think he's played a full
Yeah.
season. Yeah, he's maybe had some seasons where he only missed like a game or two, but he's had other seasons where he's missed
Yeah.
like 9 or 10 games. And Marquise Lee gets
Oh
hurt
yeah.
every single year. I mean, last year it was more of a freakish injury with the with the
Yeah, that
ACL,
was a cheap shot, I think. Yeah.
which so that that was a little bit of a different circumstance. But even aside from that, it's like every year he gets a hamstring injury. Leonard Fournette every year he gets a hamstring injury, and it it doesn't matter like how good this defense is if half of our starting offensive players like start getting injured again. We're going to be in trouble just like we were last year because we our depth on the offensive line is a little bit better than last year. And of course, last year we went through so many linemen, like no team could have withstood that amount of injuries and still been playing fine. But if Linder and Norwell go down again, do you trust Tyler Shatley? And I mean, Shatley's been okay, but do you trust Brandon Thomas to go in there and get the job done? I don't know. And Cam Robinson had some inconsistencies even before his ACL injury,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
do worry about
I
our
like
left
the right.
tackle
I think
position.
I'm gonna like the right. Well, the left side's supposed to be better, but Norwell actually was completely healthy in Carolina. He's just gotten injured here.
Yeah,
So yeah.
he's one of our few. I mean, he got hurt last year, but he's one
Mhm.
of our few players on the offensive side of the ball where I would say, well, I even though he got injured last year, I don't worry about him quite as much. But I don't know, man. Like
Heard a doorbell.
these these
Yeah, I'll go check that real quick. You can keep
these
going, Eric.
yeah
Oh,
these
never mind. Good, keep going.
these potential injury concerns on the offensive side of the ball are what scare me. And obviously, I mean, I'm definitely in agreement that Nick Foles is a big upgrade over Blake Bortles. Like, obviously, I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
If anybody disagrees with that, like, you probably shouldn't talk football. You're crazy. But I just don't know, man. But at the same time, with everything like we've kind of talked about too, with everything going on with, like Jadeveon Clowney holding out and Luck retiring and Lamar Miller getting hurt and Taylor Lewan being suspended, like all this other stuff going on, like it definitely gives the Jaguars a chance. And I could see this being like a 2017 situation all over again where, a lot of the other teams kind of fall apart and then we, click at the right time and win. And obviously I hope that happens. I mean, this is my team. The Jaguars became a team. Well, they found out they were getting a team when I was 5, and then they started playing when I was 7. So, for 24 years I've been rooting for this team. So obviously I want them to be good and be successful and, win the Super Bowl. But I worry with the nagging injury concerns that they've had on the offensive side of the ball. But at the same time, Zach made a lot of great points about the Foles and Conley connection. And, I've heard reports that Fournette's in addition to being healthy, that he's in a lot better shape than he's been in recently. And, we do have our full offensive line back, and, hopefully, hopefully they can stay healthy. But, and we've gotten even better on defense with Josh Allen, with the Josh Allen addition. So, my only other concern I have with the defensive side of the ball, before I end my argument and then let Connor decide how he feels, and this is something a lot of fans of other teams wouldn't necessarily know either unless you happen to watch a lot of Jaguars games, but for whatever reason, last year especially, Todd Wash, our defensive coordinator, ran a lot of zone defense, which, if I've got this group of players that the Jacksonville Jaguars have on defense with Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, I'm not running zone defense a single play. I mean, maybe every now and then to switch it up to try to disguise the coverage or something, but I'm running man-to-man defense 9 plays out of 10, because when Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye are both playing man-to-man on the other team's 2 best receivers, they are beasts. They do not let the receivers get open, which then was allowing the defensive line to come in and get the sacks, which was why the whole Saxonville thing became a thing. But then last year we ran a lot of zone, and then receivers were able to get in the open spaces in the zones, and then teams were carving us up, because obviously that wasn't, that's not Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye's strength. They're good at sticking to receiver like glue. They don't like to just guard one space of the field and that be it. It's not their strong point. And, if in the first game of the season against the Chiefs, if the Jaguars come out playing a lot of zone and Mahomes starts carving us up, that's going to have me concerned too, because I don't understand why you would run a scheme that doesn't cater to your best players. So that, depending on where they go with the play calling defensively, if they get it right and run a lot of man-to-man, then I'll be happy about that. But if they come out in a lot of zone, that's going to concern me too. So, but that's obviously an unknown. We don't know what kind of adjustments they're going to make.
Plus, they're going to do more. They're going to transition, I think, to a 3-4 too. That's a big change, because that's what Josh Allen is most natural in. So that's going to be a new addition to this team. They've never done a 3-4 anyways the last couple of years.
I would like to see them do almost like a hybrid type of deal where sometimes they do 4-3 and sometimes they do 3-4. Yeah. Campbell and Ngakoue are not going to do as well in a 3-4, I wouldn't think. But if they switch it up, and that just can make it even more confusing for other teams' offenses to game plan against, because you got to figure out which formations are they going to run, or what are you going to do in situations when they run certain defenses, and that would make it really confusing for other teams. I don't want to see them just strictly go to a 3-4, but if that's what Josh Allen's good at, then do that some plays to throw off the other team's offenses. I'm all for that. So but mainly because of the injury concerns, obviously every team could have injuries, and you never know which team's going to have a bunch of injuries and which teams aren't. But just due to the history of repeated injuries on the Jaguars offense, that scares me, and that's what prevents me from putting them in first place. That's why I have them in second. So, Connor, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to, as you guys know from the very beginning in the PowerPoint, I have the Jaguars finishing the lowest out of any of the 4 podcasters. I have them finishing third. So, I mean, while the injuries, because Eric used his, he doesn't think they're going to win because of injuries. While that is a concern for me, I'm going to go a little bit further into that. I don't think it's just going to be injuries as to why they're not going to win the division. Because, first of all, I don't think Nick Foles is the answer, honestly. Like, there's a lot of, I know, like, I mean, Zach's one of them, but there's a lot of Jaguars fans, too, that are so high on him, they think he's going to take them to new places. I just don't see that happening because in the times that you've seen Nick Foles, like last year, when he was started out the year as the starter for the Eagles, and he really didn't play that good. I mean, the Eagles were mediocre at best when he was the starting quarterback. Now, the times that he's come in and taken over towards the end of the season to take them in the playoffs and whatnot, yeah, he played really good. But I have really serious doubts about that he can keep that up for a full season. I don't think he can put up I think he's serviceable. I'll say that. I think he's serviceable, and I think he's a good game manager. But he's not going to, take the offense to the place that it needs to get to be. And obviously below him is not good.
Yeah,
so
obviously, if he gets hurt, they're done.
Well, even more so in my mind, this is one thing I agree with Eric on when it comes to the injuries, is Leonard Fournette. That's my big thing with the offense, is that if Fournette gets injured, forget about it. This team isn't winning the division. Because we saw, I don't think, combined with what I think about Nick Foles, if Fournette gets hurt and he's not, if Fournette is there for a full season, yeah, this team can contend for sure in my mind. But I don't see that happening, just the fact that how he's gotten injured so much. So I don't know if he does get injured, it's going to be a serious blow because Alfred Blue is a career backup and he can't be a starter. Then also on the offense, when it comes to the receivers, the fact that they don't have Zach, you mentioned that you think D.D. Westbrook is the number one receiver right now. Mm-hmm. They don't have a true number one receiver. They don't have a guy out there. They kind of have a similar problem that like Washington has, where so they have or I think the Jets is probably a better example. They're kind of like the Jets, where they have kind of like 3 or 4, pretty average or okay receivers. You don't have one that really stands out to be like the guy. Like, okay, this guy is really good. He's going to be the one that we're going to look to on like third down or whatever. He's like the go-to guy. I'm not sure there's quite a go-to guy yet. D.D. Westbrook is certainly developing, and he's looked good from the times I've watched him, but he needs to take another step to try and give the Jaguars that reliable option. So those are my main problems, are just on the offense, because I can't argue that the defense is probably going to be, it's top 3. I don't know if I'm 100% going to call them the best yet, but top 3 for sure. I mean, I don't see any way that they can't be top 3 unless guys start getting hurt. I do think the run defense is a slight concern. I mean, I say slight.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Marcel Darius is he's a good run stopper, but he doesn't play a whole lot of downs as a defensive tackle. So he's more of just like a 2-down player. So if they need, there's going to be times when he's not going to be in there.
Yeah.
And the other team can run the ball, and it's going to hurt them. And the fact that the linebacking core, like you said, you think it's the weakness. I disagree a little bit about that. You think that it's not as important to have good linebackers if you have good edge rushers and corners. I know Denver isn't the best example in the world, but the fact they have Von Miller and Bradley Chubb rushing off the edge, and they have Chris Harris at corner, and I'm losing his name right now, the other corner who's he's not on the level. Chris Harris, I'd say, is probably slightly below Jalen Ramsey and Boye, but the other guy's definitely not. But a team that had a solid secondary and good edge rushers, and the defense still sucked because they didn't have linebackers. So, but on this team, I don't think it's as big of a deal because the other positions are so good that they can help carry the defense. So the defense, top 3 for sure. I think Josh Allen's going to be a star. I still have no clue why the Raiders and the Giants passed on him, but that's their problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's mainly the offense for me. I don't see. You mentioned that you think that we were talking about this not too long ago. You mentioned that you think the offense only needs 20 points a game to get them places. I have a hard time seeing they can do that on a consistent basis. If Fournette gets hurt and if Foles, regresses back to his early season Philly self last year. But again, with all the other teams in the division, I would not be shocked if they ended up winning the division because there's so many other problems going on in this division like we've covered already. So, yeah, That's why I think they're going to finish a little bit lower. I guess if I had to agree with someone more than the other, I guess I agree with Eric more. But yeah.
Yeah. Just really quickly, I just want to. I don't want to spend too much more time, but my kind of, you know, counter to that is I don't think we've seen the best. I think Bortles was so bad that we haven't seen the best that we can see from these receivers, because I mean Bortles was such a bad quarterback that the receivers had to be wide open for them to get the ball, and they had no. Bortles wasn't going to throw it deep either. He was check down to Yeldon, throw away. That was it. Like that was it with Bortles.
Run the ball.
Yeah. And with Foles, I think, he's not going to be an MVP. I know that. But I think he's going to be better enough to make them at least be able to score. And I think that, and I'm so high on the defense that I think all they need to do is score a couple times. And I think he can do that. He's not going to put up Mahomes numbers or anything, but I think he's going to be. I think Bortles was just so bad that it's going to. We haven't seen the best that we could see. And I don't think Foles is going to be the best quarterback, but he's going to be a lot better than Bortles was, I think. So that's really, I think, when you boil down to it, is how much of an upgrade is Foles going to be. That's going to really be the determinant on this for this season. So now we're going on to the Tennessee Titans here. And this is a team, I've got them finishing second in the division. And to me, I'm kind of shocked when I see all the NFL Twitter and all the NFL experts and everything. It seems like everybody has the Titans finishing fourth or third, and I'm just so confused by it because out of all the turnover that's happened in the division, I mean, like the Colts, that one year when Brissett was there, they did terrible. The Texans, when Watson got hurt, they did terrible. The Titans have been the most consistent team in this division the past couple of years, and they've been like 9-7 like for 3 straight years, I believe. And I think they've only gotten better this year from last season. The offensive line, even with Lawan being suspended for 4 games, is still a good offensive line. I don't think Derrick Henry's the best running back in the world, but now he's definitely the guy. They've got Deion Lewis, so that's a nice compliment for sure. Tannehill is a pretty good backup to have at quarterback. I just feel like the Titans have been doing it for long, and I feel like they're not going to win the division because they're not the most talented team in the division, because they haven't won the division in like 10 years or something like that, but their defense is really underrated, I believe. Jerome Casey still keeps performing. He's kind of like Calais Campbell, kind of an older veteran guy who still is producing big numbers and doesn't really get talked about so much in the defensive tackle world because Aaron Donald gets so much credit for that. But Casey's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. And then they've got a lot of young pieces too, like Rashaan Evans and Harold Landry from last year draft picks. And their secondary, man, is like the former New England Patriots secondary with Logan Ryan and Malcolm Butler at corner and Adoree Jackson. I mean, it's not the best in the world, but as a team, they seem to play better, and they win a lot of close games, it seems like. It seems like they play in a lot of like dogfight games, and they somehow end up winning like overtime games and last-second field goal games. It just seems like the Titans have that clutch ability to win those close games, and I just feel like it's a tremendous disrespect to say that they're going to go from winning 9 wins for 3 seasons in a row to winning like 4 or 5 games, or not winning 9, winning 9 games from winning 9 games for a couple of years to winning just like 4 or 5 games. I just see that as a huge disrespect. And, they drafted Jeffrey Simmons from Mississippi State. And on the offensive side, I think they are giving I think Mariota's going to have his best weapons that he's ever had with now Adam Humphries joining the mix and A.J. Brown as a second-round pick. A lot of people said A.J. Brown was the best wide receiver in the draft. You can debate that, but some people did say that. And another year of Corey Davis. I don't think Corey Davis is living up to that first-round pick, selection, but still, it's another year for him, another year of experience. I think it takes a couple of years for wide receivers to really develop into being the receivers they like their primes. Not whereas like running backs are kind of like the other way around. They start out really good and then they regress. So I think that he's got better weapons. They still got Delaney Walker there. I know he's old, but he's still getting some stats. And I don't know. Just to me, I don't see the Titans going down from last year. I think they'll stay about where they are, 8-8, 9-7, bubble wild card team. But they're not going to win the division. But to say that they're going to finish last, I think actually the Titans are less likely to finish last than any other team. Even though I think that they're less likely to finish first. I just think they're kind of average, and Vrabel's an interesting coach. He's got a lot of energy, but
It's a nice
so
way to put
that's
it.
yeah, that's my thoughts on the Titans. Obviously, I hope they don't have a good year, but it's kind of like Eric with his thing, how he was saying, I hope what I say is not true. I hope what I say is not true either. I'll be perfectly happy with the Titans finishing last, but I just don't see that happening just because they finished 9-7 the past couple of years. And this is really Mariota's got real pressure now with Tannehill as the backup. So he didn't really have much pressure from a guy trying to get his job the past couple of years. So if he can stay healthy, but now even if he can't stay healthy, you've got Tannehill there. So I think the Titans are well positioned here to finish second.
Well, you mentioned, trying to stay healthy here. That's what I think is going to bring down this team is the quarterback position because Mariota hasn't lived up to both him and Winston, if you're going back to that draft class, have not lived up to their potential. And the issue here is you mentioned that, so if Mariota goes down, he's got a good backup in Tannehill, but the problem is you've got man of glass backing up man of glass. I mean, Mariota and Tannehill are two of the most injury-prone quarterbacks in the league. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out because if Mariota goes down, well, who's to say that Tannehill doesn't go down too? And then you've got Logan Woodside starting at quarterback. So, we'll see how that goes. I mean, and just for the fact, even if Mariota stays healthy, he hasn't really shown that he can carry the team. I don't think so. And he can't be that guy. And the Titans need to figure out what they're doing here with Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis because it seems like every year they can't figure out, mainly with Derrick Henry, ever since they drafted him when DeMarco Murray was in Tennessee, and then now that they've got Dion Lewis, they can't seem to figure out what they're going to do with Derrick Henry. Is he going to be the starter? Is he going to be the backup? Blah, 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 blah. We don't know. So they need to figure out once and for all what they're going to do with him because I don't think he's good enough to be a number one running back. And obviously Dion Lewis I don't think is either. So if you can somehow find a good combination with those two guys, then yeah, they could be good. But it seems like they can't figure out how to make that work. So I don't know. And then obviously Taylor Lewan being suspended for 4 games is a big blow because obviously, you don't need Mariota and Tannehill getting hurt. And when your best offensive lineman is suspended, especially your left tackle, your main pass protector, then we'll see how that goes. And Tannehill's not as much of at least Mariota's mobile, so he can kind of run away. But Tannehill's not quite as mobile as Mariota is. I like Delaney Walker. I think he's one of the most underrated tight ends in the league. I mean, no one ever seems to talk about him, but in the seasons that he stays healthy, he puts up big numbers. So, I mean, he's a big body. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism. So, again, can he stay healthy? The receivers, Corey Davis, I don't think he really deserves to be the number one receiver, but I guess he's the best they have right now. So, yeah, just kind of roll with him as a number one receiver because Humphries really isn't a outside guy.
He's a true slot.
He's a true slot receiver. So, the question is, for me, can A.J. Brown step up and be that number one receiver, like the true number one? Mm-hmm. I don't know if he'll do it this year, but can he take those steps towards, kind of like how like Juju took those steps in Pittsburgh, like, in his rookie year and then his second year, he kind of built himself up to where now he's got his chance to be the number one receiver. So I'm going to be interested to see if A.J. Brown can kind of do a similar thing, because I don't think it's going to be hard for him to work his way up to number one if he can at least perform, given the rest of the receiving core in Tennessee. And then the defense, Jerome Casey, I'm with Zach. I think he's very underrated. Again, I mean, he's been proving it his whole career, and nobody seems to give him credit for it. So he's still one of the best defensive tackles. I'm curious as to why they brought in Cameron Wake. I mean, and a really aging veteran and also another injury-prone veteran. I don't know why they brought him in, but I guess if he can stay healthy, then he can somewhat perform still, but he is getting up there in age. Mm-hmm. But the linebackers are the main concern for me. I mean, Rashaan Evans is pretty decent, but I don't have any confidence in Jayon Brown being, another one of the middle linebackers. I know Wesley Woodyard used to be a Pro Bowler, so if he can somehow find his old form, that could be good for them, but he really started to fall off, so I don't know what's going on with him. And then, the secondary is decent. I mean, I don't know how well... Logan Ryan has proved that he can be on his own. Malcolm Butler.
My God! I don't know how I skipped it, but Kevin Byard, too. That's their best one of their. He is their best secondary.
Right.
I don't see his name there.
Yeah.
Forgot.
I don't know about Malcolm Butler. I mean, it seems like he's a weird case. He got elevated to be the number one corner in New England after he had that interception in the Super Bowl. And he just kind of never lived up to it. I mean, he got benched in the Super Bowl one time. I'm sure that was for something other than his play, but I don't. If they thought that they could go without him, he wasn't worth it to start, then it means that I don't think he's as good as some people think he is. One thing that you didn't mention about Adoree Jackson that gives the Titans a good outlet here that gives them another weapon is that Adoree Jackson is a really good return man. I mean, he's really good at returning punts and kicks, so, he can be a threat from there. So I think there's the pieces, but again, I think this is similar to Jacksonville in the way that they've got a good defense, obviously not as good. It's like a worse than Jacksonville for me. Like a good defense, but an offense that isn't going to be able to perform. And the defense isn't as good to where they would need more than 20 points to win some games. I don't think the defense is going to hold teams to under 20. So, and I don't think the offense has the weapons to do that. So that's why I've got them finishing last.
Yeah, and for me, I know we're getting kind of late in the episode here, so I don't want to go on too long, because I know we've already been going for an hour and a half. But the reason why I had them finishing last before the Colts thing, and so now I've bumped them up to third. But for me, I just don't trust Marcus Mariota. It's kind of like my similar thing with the Colts. They've got a good team. They've got they've got some good talent on this team. But I don't trust Marcus Mariota. He's been very inconsistent throughout his career. It seems like he'll put a couple string of 2 to 3 games together where he does really well.
He'll throw a touchdown to himself.
yeah, he threw a touchdown to himself in that one game. But but then he has other games where it's like he disappears. And then as Connor said, him and Tannehill both have had a lot of injury problems throughout their careers too. So that's another factor going into this. But I don't know. He always does great in their home game against the Jaguars, though. Every time the Jaguars play at the Titans, he destroys us for some reason. But when we play him at home, they still beat us, but it's 6-3 or something.
Yeah.
So it's not because of him. But when we play the Titans at home, he always destroys us for whatever reason. I don't know. Please, Jacksonville, please end that this year.
I think that's going to change. I do.
God, please. So sick of losing to the Titans. it's like every year I'm like, oh, the Titans aren't going to be that great, but then even if they don't have a great season, they still beat us. Like
they all.
So,
I mean, you guys are saying all these things, but they've been 9-7 the past 3 years, and with all these guys.
Well, the thing is, though, like, I mean, you brought up a great point about them winning a lot of close games and everything, but the thing is, like, that type of like luck where they win the majority of their games by like a touchdown or less, like usually that trend reverses eventually. Like if a team has that many close
that's true.
Win a majority of them, usually within the next year or two, they start losing those closer games instead. And just Mariota just has not proven that he can like take the next step to help get this team to the next level. And teams are so reliant on the quarterback. I mean, that's why, like in team sports, like, you can easily argue that it's the most important position in any team sport. And because having a good QB or having a bad QB can make all the difference despite the rest of the talent that you have around you. And I don't know. And obviously I'm hopeful they have a bad year since I'm a Jaguars fan.
Y'all are hoping all these 3 teams have a bad year.
Yeah.
Specifically the Titans. Like, I think that's...
Hopefully this is 2017, like all over again. I mean, obviously I don't want people getting injured and stuff, but obviously I'm hopeful the Jaguars win the division again like they did in 2017. But I don't know, man. With like Delaney Walker getting older, like that worries me for them. I mean, he has definitely been a great player. I mean, I definitely will agree with that. Why, like the other guy said, like why he doesn't get talked about more, I don't know. But he is like 34, 35 now. And so that, Father Time is undefeated. So whether this will be the year he starts, regressing or not, I don't know. But I don't trust Corey Davis as a number 1 receiver. I mean, he has potential to be, but he, like Mariota, just hasn't been able to show it just yet. And Malcolm Butler, I feel like, has been exposed a lot since going to the Titans. He's an overrated corner, in my opinion. I wouldn't really want him on my team as a starter. I have a hard time trusting this team to be able to take that next step. I know they got to the playoffs a couple years ago and made it to the second round, but then, last year they were like a little bit worse. I just don't know if they're going to be able to get back to that level or not. I just don't trust it. I feel like Houston has a more dynamic team overall. I feel like Jacksonville has a better team overall. If the Colts had Andrew Luck, I feel like they would have a better team overall. So that's why I had them last initially. But as we've stated many times, though, this is the one true division in football where any team could win or any team could finish last. I mean, this is the one division where if I get it completely wrong, I would not be shocked. So I guess that's my overall final thoughts on the Titans division in general. Like, I'm excited for the season, man. We've covered all the divisions now, and
every team's been talked about. Yeah,
we've covered all 32 of them, and given our thoughts. Zach has been documenting in a Google Doc on who all we predicted and everything, and so we're going to see like who overall does the best job with these predictions, and we're going to do like this just kind of like an announcement, I guess, for the rest of the season. But in addition to having our Clutch Crew Sports Fantasy Football League, the 4 of us are going to be doing weekly predictions on who we think is going to win every game, and so we'll see who gets that right. And we're also going to do a survival league too, and where if you don't know what that is, that's where each week you pick a team that you think will win as a lock, and if you get it right, you advance. But the catch is you can only pick each team once, so
you can't take New England every week.
You can't pick the Patriots or like the Saints. You can't pick them every week, or the Chiefs. But so we're gonna do that too, and kind of update y'all on that throughout the season, and kind of see who the best Clutch Crew podcaster is at predicting games this season.
Yeah,
so that's something else that's exciting. That's something else that's exciting to look forward to in addition to the fantasy football.
Yeah,
we got a lot going on here. So
it's a completely changing. Episodes are going to be completely different than how this one's going to be. We're running pretty late here, so I don't want to, go the full in depth, but we are going to be trying to put out 2 episodes a week. So you'll probably see them on Tuesdays and Fridays. The Friday ones are going to be primarily prediction-based shows for college and NFL games, and then also our fantasy lineups, any DFS that we do. And then Mondays are going to be like reactionary games to what we saw. And then kind of like our early fantasy picks, early people looking ahead in the week.
Waiver wire pickups and stuff.
Yeah, it's some stuff like that. And then also we are going to be doing a little bit of kind of an NBA preview, but it's going to be a lot more simplified than this NFL preview because also NBA teams have a lot smaller teams than these NFL teams do. So we'll do it
3 positions.
And it's a star league too. So we're only going to be doing a division per week, and they'll be pretty short, pretty brief. Right before the season starts, we'll do like a bigger episode where we have like our playoff predictions and MVPs, awards, and stuff like that. Likewise, we are doing that for NFL and college next week. That'll be the next true episode out. Is going to be, we've all said who we think is going to win the divisions, but the real money comes in the playoffs. So we're going to come up with our playoff predictions, our yearly predictions, MVPs. Same for college, the college playoffs and college Heisman winners. So the next episode is going to be more predictions than you've ever seen before. Because you got to remember, there's 4 of us here, so we've all got our own opinions on these things. But yes, sir. And then the draft, the draft live stream coming up in a couple days. And really quickly, we will put in some current events. So, Connor.
Okay. I was thinking we were going to skip this. We've been going for a long time, but
go ahead.
So we're probably going to only spend like a minute on each of these. So DeMarcus Cousins been arrested. There's an arrest warrant out for him on a domestic violence charge. Apparently, he his ex-girlfriend, who he has a 7-year-old son with this woman. He was getting married to another woman, and I guess his daughter was supposed to be, like, his ex-girlfriend was going to bring his daughter there or something, and something like that. And Cousins threatened her, like he said he was going to put a bullet in her head, and all this bad stuff that he was saying to her. So yeah, not good for DeMarcus Cousins and not good for the Lakers. Then moving on to the U.S. Open going on right now, just some highlights. Venus Williams is out already again. I'm not sure what's going on with her, but she's really sucking right now. But all the other big names are still in. Serena Williams, Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Nadal, all advanced. I think Djokovic in his last round had some sort of shoulder issue, but it was his left shoulder, and he still won in straight sets. So I'm assuming it's not too big of a deal with him. So we'll see how this folds out in the future. And lastly, I guess, do you want to talk about this, Zach?
Yeah, I'll talk about this. So Florida State and Boise are scheduled to play. They were scheduled to play in Jacksonville at TIAA Bank where the Jags play, and that's now been moved in light of Hurricane Dorian coming through. As you guys can see, there's some football scores up on the top there. I'm
liking these scores: 55-0, 35-0, 28-0.
Yeah. This is the cakewalk time for teams.
I still think you could come back and win this.
Yeah, and so this is like the first official sporting event that's been changed. I'm sure there's like concerts and entertainment stuff that's been delayed, but so anyways, this is moving from Jacksonville to Tallahassee. Game's still going to take place. It's just going to be a home game for FSU, but it really was going to be like a home game anyways if it was in Jacksonville, but it's going to be on campus, and that's the first news from the hurricane. Hope everybody stays safe. If you're listening from South Florida, really the whole east side of Florida is in potential danger. So I really hope everybody stays safe, and I hope it's not as bad as some of the hurricanes have been in past years. But definitely, take preparation seriously. Now's the time to prep for this. But anyways, guys.
One last quick note.
Yeah.
I want to ask why on an article about Florida State and Boise State there is a video with cheerleaders in UCF uniforms.
They put random videos on these articles that have nothing to do with. Yeah,
that map all looks super creepy in the middle.
I know.
Whatever's going on there.
That is really weird. But yeah, so thank you guys for listening. If you listen to the whole thing, really appreciate you guys. Got a lot of information packed into this episode. Future episodes won't be as long, probably 45 minutes to an hour. I'm talking really fast now, but all right, guys, that's it for today. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Peace.